Brilliant. So just to confirm, we've now started recording today's webinar. So firstly, just to say a good afternoon and welcome from us at Inspire to this April's webinar. I'm joined today by partners across the consortium from our pilot programs, particularly who will be speaking about their experiences in navigating particularly the impacts and latter stages of the pilots. And within that, we have intentionally sort of named today's session and webinar as the day after, particularly in the framing around that kind of process of asking sort of what happens next within the history and the navigation of the participatory process, particularly within programs, and see a legacy or an impact phase that often struggles to extend beyond, particularly sometimes the formal sort of positions of funding. Today, we're going to be sort of looking and asking questions around about how participatory processes and outcomes can be sustained over time, but also looking at particularly as well the role institutions, practitioners and policymakers often play in the relational embeddedness that precedes the often formal demarcated end of projects, and looking at the legacy of how that continues. Obviously, particularly over the last few years, and obviously Inspire being an example within that, there has been this rise in interest in programs focused on building a more participatory society, and this has obviously been highly welcome, but frequently there's often a lot of observations of these one-off cycles where things often struggle to maintain and look at what happens next. So obviously at this stage in particular, and also for Inspire, we're at an interesting point to start asking some of the necessary questions around what happened next, but also reflecting on some of the core challenges that we faced within our own experiences within this project, but also looking at that responsibility of what happens in, as nicely quite named, the day after. So with that, I'd like to start by handing over to Sonia to take us through the first sort of section of today's webinar.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. So I'm Sonia Busu from the University of Birmingham. We have a series of very short 5 minutes presentation to share what happened across these 7 pilots that we implemented under the Inspire project. So in the UK, next slide, we focused on youth employment. So our approach combined legislative theatre, participatory research, and a digital space on the CDIM, a civic tech platform that supports the whole Inspire project. And we worked in partnership with the Young Combined Authority, a youth advisory body to the West Midlands Combined Authority, and Youth Focus West Midlands, a local youth organisation. And we recruited a diverse group of 15 young co-creators between 14 and 17 years of age to focus on youth employment. Many very new to youth participation, and so we supported their involvement by paying a stipendiary above the living wage and also by refunding travel expenses. And over 2 months, guided by expert legislative theatre facilitators mentored by Katie Rubin from the People Act. These young people created Your Fright, the realities of youth employment, an unscripted play on barriers to careers and work, barriers shaped by intersecting inequalities. And the play is really grounded in these young people's lived experience. So the play was performed in 2 public events, 2 legislative theatre events, and also at the West Midlands Youth Summit in summer 2025. And in legislative theatre, the audience, in this case, policy stakeholders, but also employers, community members, family and friends of the young people. So in legislative theatre, the audience become spectators. So they enter the scenes to co-create policy proposal, in this case with our young actors. So the stage is the space of deliberation, and young people also documented the process throughout, also after the legislative theatre, throughout the dialogues with policy stakeholders, and they used blogs, podcasts, peer reflections, and youth-led interviews with policy makers and employers. So next slide. So for us, the day after began as soon as the applause stopped, so to speak, and young people were not interested in symbolic participation. They really wanted evidence of follow through. So the day after involved negotiating with institutions and try to hold open spaces of collaboration and dialogue. And so our impact phase at the moment focuses on a few key proposals that emerged from the project, a youth-led evaluation of career support in Birmingham to inform the city's employment and skill strategies, alongside building also a cross-sector partnership on youth employment involving the council, colleges, employers, and youth organizations. But the impact phase also revealed a lot of fragility. And when policy champions moved to other roles, for instance, one proposal that young people really believed in is accreditation system for youth-friendly employers. This proposal lost institutional backing, and so the accreditation standards had to be reworked as voluntary principles, with a local college taking the lead and involving the employers they work with to pilot these principles, and the institutions becoming observers. So responsibility shifted sideways rather than upwards in this case, showing that impact really relied on relational labor and distributed leadership. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So navigating this phase, the three reflections stand out. First, embeddedness is relational, not procedural. So participation became consequential through ongoing relationship between publics, civil society, and institutions. And so these relationships require time, trust, and emotional labor. And these are capacity that really institutions are rarely set up to recognize and resource. Then the second reflection, inclusivity clashes with institutional timelines. The lives of young people and marginalized groups do not align neatly with bureaucratic rhythms. So when institutional timelines shift or stall, inclusion is often the first casualty. And so sustaining participation requires institutions to adapt routines, communicate change in a transparent way, maintain dialogue, take responsibility for follow-up over time. And then the last reflection, creative methods need organizational uptake to shift power. So creative and arts-based methods like legislative theater can temporarily disrupt hierarchies and surface lived experience in emotionally resonant ways. But this creative knowledge is easily filtered out by organizational cultures that tend to privilege technical evidence over relational and experiential forms of knowing. So creativity can open doors, but only institution can hold them open. So a few questions to kick off this, to set the tone of this discussion, and I hope we can come back to these questions later with the audience. How can, and this question really emerged from our experience in the UK, but I think across the pilots, how can institutions practice accountability as an ongoing relationship rather than a one-off response? How can institutions communicate uncertainty without eroding trust? What organizational conditions would make knowledge grounded in lived experience authoritative? And how can responsibility for participatory outcomes be held collectively over time? So final slide, and that's it for me. To conclude, I would say the day after is where participatory democracy is either diluted or deepened. And so for us, creative youth-led processes could shift relationships and help to open institutional doors, but sustaining this change requires really long-term alliances and a commitment to treat these young people's knowledge as legitimate political expertise. And that's it for me. And I think Roberto is next.
Okay, so hi, and Roberto Falanga from the Institute of Social Sciences, University of Lisbon, and actually here with me, there are also the two research assistants that have collaborated in the in this pilot, João Morim and Mariana Rosa. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, the pilot in Portugal. So we had three main goals. The first one, of course, was to conduct research about arts-based methods with a focus on the intersectionality, on the intersectional inclusion of people with disabilities. This was our target group. The second was about co-designing a safe space for the development of this participatory experience with people with disabilities. And the third and most important for this seminar was the establishment of a network with institutional and non-institutional actors. And then all this was done with a very comprehensive set of actions that were co-designed together with the people that we engaged in the pilot. As you can see on your right, we have conducted several methods. We have implemented several methods. Next slide, please. So, yeah, and this is a picture of the day, not the day after, but the day of the performance, where we had our participants and also artists. This is something that maybe is useful to stress when we compare with the other pilot that also used the legislative theatre in the UK. In our case, we engaged also with artists that led the pilot itself, I mean, in terms of creation together with other participants, all of them, of course, with disability. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then the day of the performance. So as Sonia said, this is the day of the deliberation. And how did we work the deliberation out? So let me say that the interaction between the stage and the audience that co-creates together the proposals for change in terms of law, but also change in terms of policies. In our case, laws and policies related to disability in Portugal, but also in Lisbon. This was based on an in-depth examination of existing legal frameworks and policies, and also the political opportunities that we could have to propose change. And then, of course, this was combined with the lived experience of the people with disability that share their daily, life of so many barriers, physical and symbolic barriers in our society. And we focused on four main policy areas and legal areas. The first one was urban mobility and transportation, the second, education and employment, the third, housing, and the fourth, independent living and personal assistance. These four areas were picked by the artists and participants together. Now, let me say that in terms of proposals, I want to stress three main factors. The first one, we combine two different scales and limits in terms of political action. So we had at the same time proposals addressing the metropolitan and municipal authority and the national government. In terms of horizon for the implementation of proposals, here also we combine two different horizons. On the one hand, short-term proposals that essentially aim to improve existing norms, and also medium-term proposals that address resource allocation and also systemic gaps in the law. And then third, the mobilization of a wide range of actors. So, of course, we had the institutions. Also, let me say that the municipality of Lisbon was our partner, and this was key in order also to consolidate somehow the embeddedness of these proposals within the municipality. But we also engaged with the civil society, so many NGOs, advocacy groups, and also activists. Next slide, please. So now about the day after, some learnings, and of course also a lot of questions, but some learnings. The first is that to build a reliable network with institutional and non-institutional actors, we need time. So we understood how important it was to start building this network from the very beginning of the pilot. This is not something that you do at the end. This is something that you start from the very beginning. Then, as I already said, diversify the range of members. So policy uptake is essential, but also the support of civil society. So it was very important to have NGOs, advocacy groups, and activists with us. Then, of course, make sure that there is commitment, political commitment, of course, but also commitment from these social actors to help reach out the population, I mean, the society with these proposals. Then, as I said, I mean, this takes time, and this is why we did this from the very beginning, because at the very heart of this experience, there is the building of mutual trust. Without that, this is impossible. I mean, without trust, without mutual trust, it is impossible. And let me stress that it's helpful to consider whether to remunerate some members of this network. This is a practicality, but this is very important because they are giving their time for the sake of this participatory deliberative process. To nurture commitment after the proposal, so after the day of the performance, is essential, as much as keep building a collective effort with the members of the network. In this case, let me stress that it's important also to identify some target members, because according to the proposals, according to the nature of proposals, according to the scope of the proposals, you may want to, consolidate the relationship with some target members. To boost the outreach, this is also very important. So adequate media coverage is very important. We made an effort to have not just the performance, but also the proposals publicly disseminated also in the national newspapers, and then multiply the fronts of action. So as I said, it was very important for us to diversify the range of actors, and this is because the more actors we engaged with, the more we felt that there was a chance to raise awareness in the society, but also the pressure that we can actually do with the institutions. And I think this is my last slide, right, Stephen?
Actually, that was your last slide. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Roberto. Anna, we'll come to you next if you'd like to sort of join.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Przybylska from the University of Warsaw, and I represent the team of the University of Warsaw, including Lesia and Boris, and also Anna, who deals with more the digital side of the project. But also, I want to highlight that we benefited from the support of several partner institutions and organizations without which this project wouldn't be possible. So, first of all, the Association of Ukrainians in Poland, and then the Warsaw Center for Family Assistance and the City Hall of Warsaw, which run the center, long-term center for refugees, war refugees from Ukraine, and Game Changers Academy, who supported us with designing the tasks for our participants. So the goal of the project was twofold. So firstly, we wanted to create, as it was mentioned by people who were speaking, safe place and inclusive place and space for war refugees, and this is a sensitive group. And those refugees were a particular group of refugees because they lived in the long-term hospitality care centers. So those were people who were retired or they were the only carers for dependent family members, also people with disabilities or chronically ill. And And the second goal was to use this safe space between game and play, the activities, to involve our participants in the reflection on their needs, resources that they have, and barriers to independent living or well-being, economic and social well-being, rebuilding their life in Poland. Right. So the process was, the larger process was, had several stages and was quite long. The first was preparatory stage. We built connections. We built the group, like connections with associations that support refugees, also with institutions running the centers. And we asked them for the support, knowledge about the needs, special needs of refugees. And we asked them through the questionnaire, for example, about the possible expectations from the process. So we involved them in creating tasks, workshops for designing the activities for our participants, and the processes. The two parallel processes took place in Przemyśl, that is on the border with Ukraine, and in Warsaw, that is the capital, the largest center where refugees came after crossing the border when they decided to stay in Poland. When the process is finished, well, we had, of course, to analyze the material, but as I will share with you later, I wouldn't say that the whole process is complete. We plan next stages to make it more embedded and sustainable, and in connection with the two goals. So one, proposing the safe space for self-expression of needs and creating the community. And the second, reflecting on the needs, or well, actually reflecting on the framework institutional support for refugees. Next, please.
Just to say, Anna, we've got 1 or 2 minutes. Just if we aim to keep to time, if there's any particular points you want to just.
Okay. So yes, sure. The process, the workshops were addressing specific issues, and we tried to design adequate activities that would allow for free and comfortable sharing of experiences, and also trying to design the process of support for this particular group, because we also involved the external experts who came to advise, but the agenda was built by our participants. So next, please.
Oh, sorry.
The outcomes of the outcomes of this process, when we think about the first goal, so we can measure the satisfaction from our participants by analyzing the processes. We also ask them questions about how they felt during the process, what kind of needs this process met. And we learned that the activities between play and game were adequate insofar as they were flexible. So also the activities were varied, so everyone could join or leave at any time and join the activity that they felt comfortable with. But I would say that majority of people would be involved all the time. Some of them would remain sometimes silent because of the difficult experiences. And they also could control the context. So I think it was important to them because they built the trust to the process along the process. So next, please. Then, when it comes to the reflection on the needs and the knowledge they received from the experts and the information that we received about the needs and resources, I would say that the most difficult element of the experience is uncertainty about the future. And that's what we want to address during our workshop on next Tuesday, because together with organizations and institutions, we are going to design the process of consultation of regulations that we would expect from institutions. I mean, the law changes, the framework guiding the institutions and the support that is offered changes. So we want to make the institutions more aware about how the inability of organizations and those institutions who directly support refugees to inability to contribute to the change of regulations, framing the regulations may affect those most vulnerable groups of war refugees. And when it comes to processes and the continuation of the process, like creating safe space, so we proposed, thanks to our colleagues, we reflected also with local organizations, institutions on the one particular method, legislative theater, and its potential to involve, to create this safe space for refugees in the future, for them to express their needs in a new situation, because majority of care centers have been closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Vanessa?
Hello, everybody. My name is Vanessa Liston from Civic in Ireland, and I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues in University College Cork as well, Catherine Ford and Titus Biswas. So for the Irish pilot, our team partnered with the Intercultural Women's Network in Ireland, or known as the IWN. And this organisation has been a support for migrant women for over 10 years now, and it was co-founded and led by Jean-Cherie Phelan. And together we explored both the needs and effects of migrant women in engaging with policymaking processes on issues that are affecting their. Over the course of the year within the Inspired Journey, we used visual art to express the women's lived experiences and challenges. The drawings and the views that women expressed, as you can see here in the events, so the first arts-based engagement event, they were captured and developed into an art exhibition of around 40 images representing what women said and what they drew during these events. At the next stage, the women identified actions based on the common issues that they identified, issues that could be addressed at both national and local level. And their first focus was the local council level. So the women developed a proposed welcoming county policy, and as it was Kildare, it became a welcoming County Kildare policy. And that set out proposed ways to connect communities, reduce isolation, improve knowledge of the services, and how to participate in decision-making. So these are the key issues or challenges that they identified at the local level. And this policy is based on what's working in the UK in some cities. The final event, as we see here, number 4, was an exhibition of this art developed and their proposed policy to elected councillors. And this art exhibition had a very strong communicative impact on participants. Following that, the women worked with councillors to prepare a motion to advance the policy in council. Next slide, please. So the day after, what does that look like and what is the journey now? So the women attended the council meeting at which the motion was put forward, discussed and passed. So this means that the policy is now progressed to the local community cultural and integration strategic policy, which is the formal policy development channel of council. And the committee comprises elected members, officials and members of civil society who will work together to bring that policy forward for adoption. At council, the women were also invited to input into the new Kildare integration strategy as well, which is a 6-year strategy currently being refreshed. So current things to look out for at this point now is ensuring that the challenges, budgets and resources are addressed by officials so that the policy does progress through. The positive things supporting that are that the council launched its public sector duty strategy last November, and this forms a valuable framework for its progress. And also the Irish government will be bringing out an integration strategy this year, which will also inform the policy development. So a new integration strategy. So in terms of observations, the next slide, please. Thank you. So we can see here the councillors here discussing at the art exhibition event. Our first observation is that opportunities do exist for inclusion in policy development, but these have to be activated both by communities, representatives and officials. In our case, they were activated through the representative system to input into the policy-making processes. At the same time, IWN are connecting with communities and holding events, living the policy that they brought through and engaging with representatives and officials. And developing ownership and capacity was key in the project. So while the process was led by the Inspire academic team in the first 2 events, that was the process of sharing, learning and codifying. It was then taken forward with the Intercultural Women's Network leading through on the policy engagement processes. I think that was crucial in terms of sustainability and embedding. The next thing that was very striking was the power of the art exhibition and codifying their views into art. It communicated powerfully and it persists and creates a very strong communicative presence in policymaking spaces. So the IWN intends to bring this to other councils with the proposed policy, as well as national level and beyond. So one of our key questions from the experience of the growth of opportunities through the process is, how can communities, in taking their own power and leadership, result in change to the ways institutions understand opportunities for engagement to address their key challenges in delivering their functions and their obligations? So where institutions are beset, as we know, by challenges, resource constraints and risk aversion, can value be demonstrated and measured instrumentally in strengthening those outcomes and obligations? Or in other words, can inclusive policy engagement be shown to benefit in a way that it becomes embedded as an essential delivery tool? These questions maybe we can discuss today. I'll hand over to our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Brilliant. Mirta?
So we at the Applied Research and Communications Fund based in Bulgaria, over the past year, we conducted a pilot program for the social participation of women aged 50 to 64 who are excluded from, have dropped out of, or were at risk of dropping out of the labor market, yet wish to continue or resume their employment. The process included a variety of stakeholders that could contribute to this process, from the government, NGOs, academia, and the business sector. So why this group specifically? Because they face very particular issues. Bulgarian women in this age range are frequently burdened by structural issues, not just age or gender discrimination, but also their role as primary caretakers of children or other family members in need. as well as the economic conditions of the past decades that forced many of them into the gray economy, which effectively had a severe impact on their access to pensions and to insurance. So their inclusion in the labor market is a very pressing issue. Migrant women and those in rural, isolated areas, of course, are faced with especially heavy burdens. Naturally, a lot of people in this group are also impacted by the dynamic social and technological changes that one could say undermine their qualifications or rendered them obsolete in some ways. So what we did was provide a space and setting for participants to express what challenges they face and delve deep into the structural vulnerabilities that they have come to know. This was facilitated through interviews, as well as emotional and artistic methods. For example, one of the things that was used was a friend from abroad technique, which helps participants see themselves from the outside, so to speak. What we achieved from this was essentially much deeper insight into the source of this social group's fears and their discontent with their current conditions and the way that their issues are addressed by society and by public authorities. Could you move to the next slide? So the participatory process included assemblies where participants used theater, artistic posters, and storytelling to illustrate the structural challenges they face, as well as the individual, social, and institutional changes that they want to see and that they would benefit from, as they focused through their art on discrimination, on inequality, and unfair treatment. And it was a very touching process where participants relayed their experiences through humor, through mutual encouragement, and through narrative tools, as well as mutual support. Could you... what did this process bring us in succession? Essentially, it showed us that participation requires a very deep understanding of and respect for the target group's fears, wishes, and concerns. While the participants were hesitant at first, specific steps were taken to meet their desires and help them feel valued, which was a catalyst for the entire process being effective. And secondly, distrust toward public authorities and administrative institutions persists, despite opportunities and efforts for participation, because, of course, people who have had such negative experiences often feel powerless and harbor distrust toward these respective authorities. Would you turn to the next slide? So what do we need to do taking this process into consideration? First of all, continue enhancing public participation, strengthening the confidence of vulnerable citizens, and empowering them to speak about their lived experiences. And secondly, we need to bring public authorities and other stakeholders closer to citizens, and they have to be the ones to make this initiative, and they need to bridge the gap in mutual understanding and foster relations for impactful co-creation. This pilot provided us with very significant insight into the concerns and desires of a societal group that is very often overlooked. We have better knowledge of how to bridge the psychological and social gap between vulnerable citizens and public authorities and other stakeholders. So the day after for us means furthering our work and our collaboration with other societal actors that ensure the rights and inclusion of women over the age of 50 that seek to maintain or restart their realization in the labor market. And it means producing diverse institutional and social change rather than relying on isolated or one-off forms of participation that will just leave them disappointed. So I would say this is these are the lessons we learned and the lessons that will propel us forward.
Thank you. Brilliant. Alice?
Hello, everybody. My name is Alice Koubova. I'm from Czech Republic, and I will present the pilot that we developed together with a professional theater group called Tante Horse in South Bohemian town České Budějovice, which is currently also a European Culture Capital 2028 municipality. If you, Stephen, can make one more click, then you will see also yes, thank you. We started to work with the municipality to actually support their main theme, which is permaculture and creating such a community that is capable of agency and resilience towards unexpected critical problems and societal conflicts. And the challenge that we through the primary focus groups developed was a manosphere and dangerous polarization through extremism that is very often connected to young male adults. We therefore wanted to create some kind of intermediate space, which is theoretically based in Donald Winnicott's theory, in order to facilitate very difficult themes in a way that will not go into bigger polarization, but rather capacity to sustain conflicts and maybe understand the other side of the other social group. The outcome was very strong, that consisted in reevaluation of stereotypical evaluations of teenagers, the activization of parents and cooperation between parents and school, and heightened sensitivity to how actually young male adults and young male teenagers can be marginalized through specific societal pressures. Next slide, please. The methodology we used was that we used interviews with young male adults from the municipality. We organized focus groups of different age groups and societal groups. We asked young male adults to create short films that were only focused on their role models. Yes?
Oh, there we go.
We then designed together with a group of 6 young men a performance lecture that also consisted in basically first creating some kind of safe space in which people could question themselves about their stereotypes towards young men and their own gender interpretations. Then we shared the knowledge of our desktop research, focus groups, and interviews. Then we facilitated a very, very long discussion, and then we enabled an informal garden sharing of what we actually discovered and learned. And the last, please. After that, we made a sociological participatory evaluation. So we had a sociologist with us who observed during the whole process what happens and gave us a very thorough feedback. Yes, next, please. These are photos from the performance lecture, where you can see that there is a combination of theater that was prepared, the performance lecture, together with the questionnaire, the informal gathering, and the discussion. Thank you. The day after consists, in our case, first of all, in dissemination and through different media, podcasts, radio interviews, and creating a certain kind of better understanding of the theme in the Czech society in general. We started to cooperate also with the national NGOs that are involved in the same theme, like League of Open Men, Mongagua Sport Club, or Galleries Letka. But we also decided that we will rework the performance lecture in such a way that can be very well used in school environments, sport clubs, and culture institutions across the whole Czech Republic. So it will have a form of certain kind of package that will be now offered and shared during the whole over the whole country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe I'll hand over to Daniel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Oros. I'm a political scientist working at the Center for Social Sciences in Budapest. And today I'm going to introduce you the pilot we did in Budapest with the Hungarian team. Next slide, please. So what we did, the challenge was to work with people with housing needs. And for that aim, we have selected a location, a rented house of the municipality of Budapest, where before the pilot, a group of 130 residents moved in, and many of them were former homeless people. So the aim of the city was to help those people in need, and they provided the space. But what was missing was a group of people. What was missing is, adequate service for those people, and they struggled in life with many problems. So we used the method of photo voice, mental mapping, social drama, and interviews to better help this community to reveal their problems and to tell policymakers, what are their needs, what are their problems. And as I will present in this short presentation, we also came up with some action plans and proposals together with stakeholders to help these people and to provide a more vision, a more livable vision and future plan for this community. Next slide, please. So talking about the methods, throughout the pilot, we used the so-called social drama method to form group of those people, who just living together without knowing each other. So the social drama method was very important on the one hand to create these groups, and also we used this social drama to actually help these participants to find their own problems. So in that term, we co-created the research question together them, and we found the most difficult issue being the security of the house. So once we found the research question and the problem, we moved to the photo voice method, which actually helps participants, the residents of the house to explain with a camera how they see the problem of security. And one of the most striking problem that policymakers otherwise probably did not know, that despite the fact that there were cameras everywhere, security was not provided. So you see this picture, and you see also this quotation, and we talked about this problem that, it turned out that cameras actually had no consequence at all, and people could go out and in without being disturbed, by others, and that was a serious problem because it turned out that the cameras actually did not prevent anybody from entering to this building. Next slide, please. So then we also conducted interviews with policymakers, how they see the role, their role in the life of this community, what they can provide to this community, and what do they think they should provide or could provide better if asked, and how they could better cooperate with participants and these people who live in this building. And then also residents interviewed other residents. So we, again, just to create community, we also invited participants to talk to other participants and the residents to create a more strong and coherent group of people, of those people who just live next to each other. And then as a final but very important step, we also did mental mapping. So this map, those people living in the building actually could explain room by room, floor by floor, door by door, how secure they find different places of the building, what could be made better for their life, and also they revealed how they themselves could help their community to provide more security, and how they could watch to this security better and find some solutions together. Next slide, please. So all in all, what are our reflections? We as researchers realized that such a participatory research needs a joint work of social workers, artistic experts, and academia, and each having different roles. So like social workers really opened the doors for us to get in touch with people, because they were the ones who knew the situation of of those people living in the house. Artistic experts brought the tools that I just mentioned, these methods, the social drama method, the photo voice method, the mental mapping method, and academia brought actually the method of interviews and also all kind of scientific knowledge to better understand their situation and to come up with action plans. And with that, I would move to let's say the day after part of our presentation. So what we came up with, we managed to highlight how participatory budgeting of both of the 9th district and of the municipality of Budapest could help actually the situation of people living in this building. Some proposals actually got successful, like one proposal from the 9th district to support young people living in the house. So that's something that provides some sustainability to our action. And then we also made some action plans for future funding schemes. So like a coordinated group of people who talk to policymakers whenever there will be new future EU funds related to housing needs that could be targeted to this vulnerable people living in the house. We also were thinking about, and we hope for getting some support for this, because we submitted an application to the so-called Scale Them piloting program, and the municipality, so the owner of the building, provided a small little sum that can be in the future allocated via a participatory budgeting method by the residents and for the residents of this building. And maybe one very easy solution that could be used for the future and the development of people living in this building. We also noticed that there are many empty storage places within the building which are not well used, because it's a former factory building and now they are empty rooms. So maybe once these action plans get developed, those storage places could also help support the people living there. Maybe some civic organizations could move in and somehow they could better be contacted. I mean, participants and residents of the house could be better connected to the civic society of Budapest. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. So this is my last slide, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Well, brilliant. That brings us naturally to sort of opening the conversation up to both speakers, but audience members as well. If anyone has any particular questions they want to ask, please do post them in the chat and we'll sort of air them to the room. Otherwise, obviously, I think it's there'll be some quite interesting questions that we can sort of pose and maybe ask as well. I don't believe at the moment just anyone's sort of had or popped anything in the chat yet, but I think I might also simultaneously kick off with a question, which actually Daniel, I'm going to just ask you about this in particular, just around a point that you mentioned that I'd be interested just to come in here about. Just around the interconnection when we talk about participation in relation to public infrastructure. So particularly in the way that obviously some of the action plans that you mentioned around participatory budgeting, I'm interested particularly in your view, and then obviously going out to if anyone else wants to contribute to conversation around the way in which infrastructure in particularly and the way place-based infrastructure plays a role within participatory processes. I mean, obviously we have a lot of conversations where we talk about how being able to access locations, being able to maintain physical spaces and the presencing of participatory spaces obviously plays quite a significant role in the continuation beyond in the sort of the framing of the day after. But I'm interested to sort of hear your views about the role that having, in this case, a physical residential house, a building, plays within that infrastructure element that is quite important when we sort of reflect on participatory processes.
Thank you very much for the question. And here it was quite obvious for us that the space is very relevant, because this is a huge space where these participants lived, but a huge part of the space it was unused. And it was also interesting to see, those people with housing needs who were actually in the middle of opportunities, because the building is both in a district, 8 district that provides participatory tools like participatory budgeting, and located in Budapest, it also offers such opportunities. And what we really needed some kind of landing on this area, like some people who come to this space, some people who actually, on the one hand, like stakeholders understand why these people are just not able to submit, even if it's, you know, just a form that you need to submit and then you can get funded. They're just not able to submit a document to the municipality. And on the other hand, we really needed to develop the community within the building so that they understand the aims and the program and the how actually such money can be spent, what this stakeholder actually needs from them. So it's really a complex task, and that's why we needed artistic methods. And oftentimes we didn't even talk about, you know, the exact thing like participation. We're talking about many things to create community. We use these artistic tools also to get rid of the everyday problems that those, you know, people in need of oftentimes had to face. So, and in the end, it was, you know, after quite a lot of time spent together that we could formulate these proposals. And also, it was also telling when, you know, stakeholders at some point started talking instead of, you know, the infrastructural problem, the problem of the building and what should be done in terms of, you know, engineering or what needs to be invested. They started to talk about the people and started to talk about how nice it was to meet those people. And they understood that at the end of the day, those people actually can do a lot in their building. So this renting out the storage place, for example, also came from the fact that they realized that these people as a community are able to renovate some parts of the building. Then they created a gym for themselves, which again use for themselves to create community, but on the other hand show the responsibility to the owner of the building that they can and they are able. And then some of the policy proposals like this one, like renting out more spaces within the building, came from this cooperation. It was so nice to see that both stakeholders understood the capacity of the residents, and then also residents understood what is like an action that is welcome and supported by stakeholders. So this the deliberative space that we created, and also through the images and through these stories, was also quite motivating and interesting to see. And I'm very glad that we could take part in this research project.
Thank you. We've got a message or a question for Vanessa just in the chat. It was fantastic to hear how involved councillors were in the project and that they worked with the women to prepare and advance the motion in council. Would be great to know a little bit more about how soon they got involved and what methods were used to engage them, because that would be a great lesson for the future.
Sure, thank you very much for the question. So the councillors and the reps were engaged at a point at which the women felt comfortable that they had, I suppose, developed the understanding of what their needs were and what actions that they were looking for. So the policy makers were not engaged until later on in the process, and at that point, the capacity was developed that women could bring forward and discuss and elaborate on the policy with them. So after the second stage, you can see before it goes to the council, the women had their own one-to-one meetings with councillors, whether this was online, whether this was in person in meetings, where they had conversations over food about what their needs were. They understood the policy process and they asked specifically for the channel that it could go through. And the councillors then could engage with that, speak to officials in the background, bring back, you know, any information, but also work with their colleagues as well to put it on the agenda. But important to the process was then the art exhibition. And I think that had a huge impact for representatives which came not just from Kildare, but also in the counties in Dublin. 3 of those Dublin councils. And there, again, the women presented what their issues were, had that dialogue. And I suppose that's where we come back to the role of the art and the creative methods, that suddenly we're shifting the boundary, showing something that actually communicates directly, that they can also bring to other colleagues. So from that dialogue, then each of the councillors made their own commitment to bring it forward, but starting with Kildare, and that went through, was put forward as a motion and then passed and directed to the with that capacity, we found was very important, because women felt hugely empowered by the experience of having been listened to and having it brought forward and actually having meaningful outputs. And even the presence in the chamber, of having that physical presence in the policymaking chamber, also had an impact. So it's these unrational, I suppose, presence, creative and communicative aspects that were important in that moment of engagement with the policymaking process. I hope that answers your question, but look forward to discussing as follow-up.
Thanks, Vanessa. Sonia, you have your hand up.
Yes, also linking to this, and I think this is a reflection that comes from our experience in the UK pilot, and it's a question that I want to reflect on with all the other partners. I know that we're running out of time, but I hope people can stay maybe for 10 more minutes to go back to the day after, right? And these issues of embeddedness. And I find in that accountability has to be rethought as an ongoing relationship rather than just a moment of response. And so, building on what Vanessa was saying, I think, and maybe Dana also that worked with me in the UK might want to build on this. Participatory accountability is really enacted through repeated practices of attention, of presence, and follow through, and not just one-off commitments or formal endorsements. And so this trust was really built and repaired through the various follow-up meetings, ongoing dialogues, all this relational labor that had to support the sort of impact phase. And I felt that young people were actually less frustrated by limits on institutional power and what could be done than by opaque progress and weak feedback mechanism and sort of silence. So I think really we need to work on sort of relational institutions that rethink accountability as something visible but also iterative, that explain how the participatory knowledge is being interpreted, prioritized, or deferred, even when outcome seems uncertain. And I think this communicating uncertainty, it's okay. It doesn't erode trust as long as it's honest communication, and so that can support relational transparency in a way. So I don't know what other people think about this and what their experience has been.
Thanks, Sonia. Open to anyone wanting to come in off the back of that question. I mean, I have another question as well, but go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Sorry, sir.
Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to jump in to add on to Sonia's thoughts as others are collecting theirs. That communicating of uncertainty. I'm just thinking about a couple of cases in particular that happened with our young people, and the way they took that on and actually did had quite positive actions afterwards, and despite often challenges in us having concrete outcomes and the changing, as Sonia described in our presentation, the shift in the sidestepping of responsibility to community organizations and shiftings of policy agendas that happen. But we've actually got still very engaged young people in the process who are now getting involved quite actively in other social and political activities and organizations. And I think that's proof that when there is that accountability and when there is that openness of dialogue, that you might not see necessarily those concrete actions from policymakers in that moment, but that it's a continued process, and it is also involves young people having the democratic capabilities built up to do other things alongside. So yeah, curious to hear what other people have experienced in relation to that.
I'm going to add off the back of this in a reflection that sort of pulls from this point as well. But I think there's this interesting sort of point around the maybe the reframing of how we sort of like slightly understand the role that relational dynamics play within the grounding of the longevity of the relations that are formed through participatory processes. Because participatory processes within their nature are relational. They are about the way that people interact with their environments, the way they interact with political, social structures, but also the way they interact with themselves and then others, particularly from the sort of framing around from sort of participants in that sense, participants to practitioners, participants to policy makers. And I think there was a question, I know Vanessa, I think you had in one of your last slides that sort of framed around this point around the understanding that forms around the access to opportunities. And I think there's probably maybe a question to the room around the way in which sort of relational dynamics that form throughout the course of the program and projects in themselves lend them to forming relations that create understandings about opportunities. And I'm sort of posing that as well as something interesting if anyone wants to come in off the back of or has any thoughts about. It's particularly that way that sort of the relationship forming almost in itself creates some of the understanding that we seek to sort of like generate around opportunities. And I think also maybe just slightly directing as well, Roberta, I think this might be something quite maybe slightly relevant to your experiences, particularly with the event recently with Renaud. But that's just a thought from me.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about, you said participation is relational. I was actually wondering whether whatever policy making process is relational. Maybe the difference is that the participatory process shows what it means to get into a relational kind of effort, collective effort to do something together, to have a common goal to pursue. And but let me stress that another difference that I see, and this is something that we found in the pilot in Portugal, is how important it is to face not to be naive and to actually face what it means in terms of power, right? I mean, it is relational, and relations have to do with power as well. So we all have different degrees of power. I mean, I don't want to, talk too much about what power means, because it's a huge concept and very complex. But I think that it is relational, but it's also about finding an agreement about how different degrees and how different layers of power can actually come together and work together to accomplish the goal of the experience. This was very relevant for us. As I said, in Portugal, we did something slightly different from what the legislative theatre was in the UK, because we included artists, and the inclusion of artists meant the inclusion of professional knowledge, which meant to add a layer of power within the experience. So for us, this was very also a sensitive issue, to manage, along with the issue of, in our case, visibility and change in policy and law, also what it means to include professional knowledge and to combine this professional knowledge with other professional knowledges, including the political ones. So what I want to stress is, it is relational, but it's also about power. Just that.
Thanks, Roberto.
I wonder if we have time for just one final sentence or just one example to show like about these hierarchies things and related to a policy like security. So just on following on what Roberto said, here in Budapest, we had a problem. Like, look, everybody knew that there is a security problem in the house, but everybody wanted to solve it in a different way. And the photos, the discussion helped the participants to see, like, security is a public good that you can provide as a team. So instead of spending lots of money on cameras that do not function, why don't you get together look around your space, look around and talk to other people, and provide security for the building as such. So again, deliberative and participatory procedures and art particularly was very helpful to move out these hierarchies, whereas policymakers puts out a camera and that's solved, and whereas residents feel still unsecure but cannot tell. So this process helped a lot to understand what security means for those people and how they can provide it as a public good together. And that's why participation, deliberation, and the hierarchies at some point, a lot of money could be saved, could be transferred to something else, and security gets provided via participatory tools. But we needed these artistic methods to move out of these hierarchical positions where everybody was just facing the other and complaining about the problem without finding any kind of real solution.
Thank you. Brilliant. Is there any maybe potential sort of final thoughts or reflections from partners before we sort of start to just sort of wrap up from today, just in consideration time, or any sort of final reflections anyone wants to add before we finish?
I think there is a lot of learning from these projects, and I think we have really focused on the post-project from the beginning. So there was a really strong focus on embeddedness from the start in building partnerships and alliances, but they can still prove very fragile because of how state institutions work and how risk-averse they often are, and how they often prioritize targets and performances, managerial approaches, while participatory democracy is relational. And so I think what we're finding is a lack of democratic capabilities sometimes within institutional stakeholders. And I think it's then the focus has to be also on culture and organizational learning from their side, not just the participants, the citizens that participate in the projects.
Thanks, Sonia. Brilliant. I think we're probably at time for today. I just want to sort of firstly and foremostly obviously say thank you everyone for making time for today's webinar and for joining. I think also really interesting to be able to hold space and opportunity to talk about this, and particularly also to offer, as I would frame it, a part of the practical vulnerability which talking about not only necessarily always about the successes of things, but also about the inevitable challenges that the real life experiences and practice-based encounter when we take to enacting these ideas within our programs, but also more broadly beyond Inspire. So I think it's a very contextually important conversation, particularly for us to have, and quite a real and quite reflective one. Just to say as well, obviously, again, thank you to everyone who's joined. Next steps will obviously be making the recording from today's webinar available to watch back through our YouTube channel. And we're also sort of in the initial stages at the moment of just starting to pencil in and plan our next webinar, which will hopefully be in June, looking around our democratic capabilities framework. So just again to say thank you from all of us, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.